All right, Max and anybody else watching this, what are we reviewing today? We are reviewing The Silence of Our Friends, which I find to be one of the best named comics of all time and books of all time, I think. I just love the name. This is by Mark Long, Jim Demonakos, and Nate Powell, and apologies if I butchered anyone's name. It is a civil rights American story. As the title or subtitle suggests, the civil rights struggle was never black and white. So this is a story about Jack Long, the white news reporter, and Larry Thompson, who is one of the civil rights activist leaders in this story. They form a friendship. They also go through highs and lows, especially during a particular incident in which a cop is killed. Jack both kind of runs away from defending his friend and then also ends up helping him be defended in a roundabout way. But it highlights, I think what stuck out to me as like a major theme of the book is this does a very cool, it brings you to this civil rights era in America that is told through the way that I think people understand things, a very particular story, a particular friendship. And I think it also highlights just how different the world was. It was not commonplace, I think, for a black and a white guy to be friends, even to have like someone of a different race necessarily come into your home was there's some pages devoted to like how that had to be a discussion and was seen as like not cool at all necessarily. And so it, a very, again, very good slice of life thing. All right, before we go any further, now that I've reviewed it, I found some massively large paper. This is what we used to review today. I don't know why it's so big and I still wrote it so far to the left. Okay, we'll start with our patent pending scoring system. First off with the characters. I gave this a strong 8 score. For the reasons I've expressed before, I found the two main characters here, Larry, the civil rights leader father, who you can see here talking to his wife about like the craziness. Like, are you trying to use this guy, this white guy, for advancing the cause, or do you want to be friends with him? He, in this like very cool drawn page, says both, I guess. He's this interesting, complex character. Shows that he is both a passionate civil rights leader, cares about his fatherhood role, also like makes mistakes, which you see. He just creates a very believable character. He has strengths and faults, and Jack is exactly the same. Jack is sort of like interesting in the sense that he develops friendships and connections with people that aren't white, which obviously his family has some questions about and are curious about, but his family also, I think, inherits some kind of like open-mindedness, and compared to their school peers and stuff, are much more willing to argue for their dad's decisions. You see lots of great side characters, great in the sense that they are distinct and they tell a story as part of the story. There is there's a great preacher in one of these, in like a very black Protestant church, whose sermon I found really interesting in the story. There's a old war buddy who is like, makes Jack's probably alcoholism look like a joke comparatively, and ends up using the N-word and like upsetting Jack's children, and he kicks the guy out while just like, again, not characters that are necessarily making good decisions, but like characters that I felt like were all very distinct and sticky. Again, I think like the character score for me lives and dies on the main characters, and this is obviously told through the two main characters, Larry and Jack, who both are imperfect but strong in their own way characters, that I thought you also really believed their kind of friendship. It formed organically, almost begrudgingly, but then it felt very real and meaningful also when there was some amount of betrayal that was felt But we'll get into that a little bit later. So anyway, strong characters. In terms of the art, I gave this a 4. I'll get to this a little bit more. Talking to myself here, I know how I review things. I love color. I love big risks that end up looking really beautiful. I like realism. I think that this story definitely has like realistic looking. I can appreciate it. I think it has like, it's like very technically well done. I could never draw like this in a million years. I think it looks very good in that perspective. Do I think that? Do I think again that sometimes color adds a lot of depth and like maybe is its own vector for like telling a story? I mean, absolutely. I've said this 100 times. I've critiqued again some of the best books like Persepolis, my most recent review. I didn't give a huge art score because I think again that's not the reason you like read that and reread that. This is a good example again of like where this is like a crazy scene. Imagine like somebody spitting on you, again like a very racist confrontation. But like imagine what a little bit of color can do to scenes like this. I think like that some graphic novels do so well with like blood. Just like imagine that like maybe again you wanted to go very light and it's very monochromatic or grayscale stuff, but then like something like every time somebody is hit or beat, the blood is distinct and red and jarring because of that. And like if someone's spat on, like that gets a color that looks like nothing else. Like to me, details like that stick, and I feel like there were like moments in this where like I'm no artist and I'm more just like seeing moments where I feel like it could help. And I'll get to the readability, but the art style I think hurts the readability quite a lot because there's like two distinct things happening here for me, and I think you can see it so much in this panel here. So this is meant to mimic like a black and white TV, so in some sense it's doing justice in like how difficult I think it is to see what is happening here. I just don't. It's like a choice. It's just like I visually struggled with this book, and sometimes the very I think what the author thought were clear motions happening because of how much it's like they were putting too much into every scene. Like the page I showed earlier is like not like some of the pages, but like this photo or this page right here I think is not what most of the comics or most of the pages in this comic look like. Like to me, this is so easy to follow what's happening. It's so crisp and free of details. You're focusing just on this guy reflecting on his relationship to this white guy in this time of extreme civil rights unrest but like much I'm never going to get into this, but like much more of it to me in this thing is like a lot of detail drawing out the characters, so they're very complex and they kind of like make it. I just found that like the text and other stuff of the art style end up making it hard to read, and I'll get more into that later. But yeah, in terms of history and culture, I had to give this a 9 because this feels like a must read if you were in a college class. Again, this would be like a long-term goal of this channel. If any professors are reading this and looking for inspiration for things to help still actively engage like a student learning about something historical while also being educational, and not just a video. Like I think graphic novels serve such a cool purpose for helping your mind fill in the blanks, and like it has to work enough that it's, I think, sort of pulling you to think your own thoughts and connect the dots with the story you're reading. This story is a perfect kind of civil rights story. It shows so many very believable angles, like his war friend, who's this white guy that's still very clearly racist, and because of where he's at and what he's doing, ends up like kicking him out of his house, and like they end up like on the spot severing like a connection and a friendship that was once there because of like what's happening in the country. You see like a brutal attempt on Larry's one kid like hit by a driver very specifically because they dared to say something back against a driver that was like saying explicitives to them. Just I think like a beautiful capture of sort of every type of just so many relationships in this like broader Venn diagram of interactions, like how people in the black community talking to other people in the black community about the white community, how people in the white community talk to other white people in the community about the black community, how people in the white community talk to other people in the white community about how the white community are talking about the black community, and then how they meet together. Like it's like really it's a really, like, there are just so many good cross-sectional interactions between people that show how difficult it was for the Black Americans making progress in this story, and also how so many people in power were also making it hard for other like white people that wanted, or were at least open to this direction, like for making any of these voices heard. The fact that, you know, the character Jack Long is like in the media, plays a prominent role, especially when it comes down to, again, like sometimes unfortunately like violent protests that weren't necessarily instigated at all by the people protesting. Sometimes, again, the police, like, quite literally cause their own damage. And I guess this takes us to the readability part. This is a weird one to score. I gave it a 5. Why did I give it a 5? The book is only, you know, it's like just shy, I think, of 200 pages. Yep, just shy of 200 pages. I think I did blow through this whole book in like a night or two. In that sense, it's like, well, this has got to be a very readable book, right? The history and culture are very strong. It captures like a time capsule of, you know, living in the America in the 60s, and the complex relationships therein between white and black people. My parents both lived through race riots in Pennsylvania. I think that they would probably have a lot of, like, you know, visceral connection to some of the story, to some of these types of characters and stories. But what really hurts the readability, I think, is like a bleed over from the art. Like, there were a couple key moments in this story where there's this betrayal that happens, and without ruining it, I think because of just how this story is drawn, like, I just had trouble following like specific moments, and they just, to me, didn't highlight enough when some of these critical moments happened. Like, I straight up got to the end of the book where it's like, oh, this guy like abandoned this other guy, and I'm like, when did that even happen? Like, I actually didn't know what page, or like what did I miss. And there's another page where I'll show you this. It's I, you know, kind of referenced it already. I wouldn't even call it a spoiler, but there's this scene where there's like a subtle detail to me, like, that maybe I have just read so many graphic novels that the speed in which I'm reading over some of the panels, like, something about this I just felt off cadence with, where a couple key details, maybe I'm again dense, but like it took me a reread to realize sort of the context of what I missed. And I yeah, I don't know how else to say it. I think that the book creates very strong characters that you care about in a setting which I think, especially as an American, you know, has true cultural weight. I think that, like, that really compels you forward. But I think color, and somehow just the scenes end up getting to me quite busy. Like, I think it's like maybe a blend of also like trying to put in stuff that like captures what it looks like on the actual TV, which I think is interesting. It like boosts up the X Factor score a little bit. But like, if you ever have to go back and reread something because like you missed a key part, I feel like that's like a less good thing. And I think like just the like rereading it, I'm like, oh yeah, that actually detail was pretty clear, but it was like kind of like a small thing. Like, I feel like I just, reading it the first time, it was hard for me to follow, and then you're like going back and like feeling like you got lost a little bit in the story. And this happened like twice. So anyway, so I can't give it a huge readability score, because if I get confused while reading it, again, I feel like I can't quite give it like a 10. But in terms of X Factor, can't give it a 0. Like, I feel like some of the interesting X Factory elements of this is that the friendship they had was so core to this story. You know, reviewed so many books about immigration, you know, being a firstborn person in America, an immigrant in general, or war. So many stories about war. So many stories about governments cracking down on dissidents. A couple of the books I've reviewed semi-recently, it's like where sports was a central theme, or friendship is a central theme, feels kind of like X Factory, and also the fact that a little bit of like fourth wall breaking in this book is what it feels like. Like I think again the one guy I assume is the son of Jack Long, and the role the media plays, and even how like the media is pictured in some of the panels, it makes it a little bit fourth wall breaking. But anyway, so I gave it a 3 for the X Factor. This leads us to an overall a very strong 5.8. Definitely worth a read, and I would say an incredibly worthy read if you're taking like, if this would be a very easy thing to incorporate into any curriculum where you're covering civil rights stuff. I think it just gives such a human feel to it. Again, do I wish there was color and like a little, there's critiques here, but that's like what this whole thing is about, is like pointing out where we think the strengths and weaknesses are. But it really kills on the characters and the historical cultural concept, and it's still very readable. So big suggestion for The Silence of Our Friends. Really did enjoy it. And as always, my shameless plug for, speaking of reading, if you have kids, know a kid, find a kid who can't go to bed. They always try to push off bedtime. Have a friend that has a kid. You know what I mean. But I can't go to bed yet. I wrote it myself. It's about me and my own family trying to get my 2 little kiddos down to sleep every night. I'll post the link in the description. And if you have any descriptions about books you've found, graphic novels that you feel like are great cultural, historical books, leave it in the comments. I would love to have suggestions for future reviews.